Hello and good morning. Warm welcome from me. My name is Svea Becker, and I'm really sorry for the slight delay we had this morning, but actually I had some internet connection issues, so I refused to use my video today. But of course, a warm welcome again to the SAP Community Call about SAP Intelligent RPA. And of course, I'm not here alone. I have a great speaker here with me, and this is Samir Hamichi. He's a senior intelligent RPA specialist at SAP, and he's working on customer solution adoption. In his career, he was involved in developing and managing customer projects, developing libraries, and producing documentation and training materials. And of course, as you can imagine, he's also a trainer, and he worked as a technical lead. Welcome, Samir. I'm really happy that you're here with me today, and the stage is yours.
Thank you, Svea. Hello, everyone. So as Svea introduced, today I will talk about SAP Intelligent RPA on the topic managing errors during both execution. Yeah, let's start. I will start with a few slides. So to explain you the scope or the context of the material that I will show you. And then I switch directly to a project. I will start it from beginning. So I create a project, I create a workflow, and I will show you the on error and on timeout callbacks. They are some code generated after building a workflow. I will show you how to custom this code if you want. What is the scope inside? What are the available information that we can use inside. Third, I will show you from the workflow perspective how to use the error and timeout activities. These activities allow us to generate the code, so we don't have to write it from scratch or to customize it in the workflow. And last, I will discuss some configurations about the errors that we can write either in CSV files or in databases or in business activity monitoring. And also how to propagate errors from sub scenarios to up scenarios. So here, first, we'll see this code, how to generate it from the workflow to the code editor. And we will indent it and we'll see what is inside these two callbacks. As you see here, we have the on error callback that just ends the scenario. It has some parameters. We can access to the scenario object, we can access to the step and the exception. And from the timeout perspective, it's almost the same as on the error, but we have a delay or a certain time that we give for a step to finish. If it doesn't finish during this time, so the timeout is raised and we end up in this callback. And by default, we end the scenario. Here, we can customize both of them in order to make it, to make life easier for development. As you see here, I will show you these two activities that are very useful to use in the workflow from the workflow perspective. So if you are an adept of low code, no code, so this is very interesting approach. So you use these two activities and then you link all the other activities that you want here. You can think about writing on Excel, just writing logs on the debugger or the local files and many others. You can even start Excel or any other library. So let's start. Here I am in the studio. I first start my my new project. So I create a project. I call it, for example, management. Here I give it a title. Just for your information, all these data that I put here or information that I put about my project, we will use them during error exceptions. We will need some logins about my project, about my computer, and many other information. Here, title, for example. Here, the name of the client, the version, the date of the project, and also comment on my project. We will see how to retrieve them later. Now that my project is started, I will give you some tips that I do myself. For example, here, what I do, I create a script. This will be needed just to add some additional functions and settings. This, I will be back to it later. Now let's create our workflow. The workflow that I will create here, it's about fund processing. I will process some emails and then read from the emails and log some information, interesting information. The emails are asking me to buy some shares, and I will use just one activity. Here it's my custom activity. I will not do anything else. I will keep all the project as it is. And then I build my project. This is the interesting part. So when I generate my code, you will see that there is part of the scenario that are generated. Among them, the callback and on error and on timeout. Takes a little time to. Here it shows me just a warning about, let's see, just one variable. I will call it, for example, temporary variable. This file shouldn't be empty, so this warning will disappear. And then I open my fund processing here. Here is my code. The code is generated. My interesting part here is this line 29 and 30, the on error and on timeout callbacks. Here, as you see, there is my step. I will put some custom code here if I want, and then run my scenario. Let's now look just to the indentation and put some breakpoints on my callbacks. Here, as you see, it's at just end of scenario for both of them. And put here, what I will show you is on the on error callback, and it applies also to the second one, which is the on time out. I will simulate just an error in my code. What I will do is to create some code that reads my emails and process them in the log. So I already prepared some code for this. I will not write it all from scratch. What I will do is just to copy it and put it here. Here I will use the Outlook, okay? What I will do is to not include include the initialization of my library. I will add it from the libraries. I will include the Outlook library to use it. And then I will run the code as it is. As you see here, I miss some initialization of my my library. I do it on purpose to generate here. This is the missing part. I will just comment it and see what happened whenever I build and run my project. So here I execute my bot. Here I will run the project and I test my workflow. And as you see here, I break on this on error. Whenever you have an error inside any step, you will end up here. And as you see, we have 3 parameters here. If we come to the local, you have access to the 3 parameters. The first one is the scenario, the second one is the step, and the third one is the exception itself. If we look to the exception, you see here telling me that the Outlook session is not open or not is initialized. So what you have access also is the step. You can have the name of the step here. If we look, what is the name of the step? We have step custom. If we want to have the scenario, we have here the scenario, and we have the name also somewhere here. Yeah, name of my scenario here. So what can we do here now? We can do some logs, for example. We can log it on the debugger, add additional information, or write it in CSV or in a database or activity monitoring. But let's start it simple here and look what we have access. In addition to these 3 components, you have also access to what we call options, the options of your project. CTX options gives you many information. Among them, the computer name, the username, the Windows username of the machine running the code.
Samir, may I interrupt you?
Yes.
The internet connection seems also be a little bit unstable, or
Yeah.
it sounds like you are more far away from the speaker.
Okay, is it?
Yeah. Now
maybe
it's much
I will,
better. Yeah, this is much better now.
Maybe I will switch to because I have headset. I will switch to my computer one. I don't know exactly. Do you hear me better?
Not really better.
Okay, let me put it back and try to be close to microphone.
Yeah, I think this is better when you try to be close to the microphone.
Okay, now, yeah, I will try to keep it like this.
Yeah, the audience is also saying that the headset is better. Thank you. Okay. But a little bit closer to the microphone, please.
Okay, so I will do. Okay, so let's continue. Here we have the options. As I told you, we can have as many options we want, and the important ones are around the project. We have project version, client, the comment that I put in the beginning, the date of the project, and so on. We have many other options, and we will see later. I will give you more where to find snippets or some usage of that. So here, if you want to do it by hand, it's custom code. But what if we want to do it from the workflow designer? Let's now go and do it from scratch. Here, for example, I start from the beginning and I put the code as it is. So let me just, maybe I want
Samir, you're again a little bit too quiet.
Yes.
Yeah, now it's much better.
Okay. Okay, I will just put my code as it's in the beginning and then come back to my workflow. Here in the workflow, we can use the 2 activities that we have in the scenario. This scenario has some activities. The first one is how to start the scenario. Here to disable a timeout in any step you want inside or between steps. The end of scenario, explicit end. And the two interesting ones are here, the error management and the timeout management. I will start by just the error management to keep it simple. What we can do here is to add some log activities afterwards. Here, I will put these log activities and I log some message. Here, let's say, for example, here, error. And what you can do is to use the three parameters that I told you in the beginning, the exception, the step, and the scenario. They are accessible from here. You can do, for example, here as a c.name. You add, for example, here, oh, sorry, yeah. Step name. And last, we add also the exception. Exception name. And we use just the exception name here. If we want to add the message of the exception, we will add it also here. And we do dot message. And let's see what will be generated. And of course, after putting this error handling, what you have to do is to explicitly end your scenario. So let's stop now the project and do it again. Let me check. Yeah, I missed some. Yeah, I shouldn't add this semicolon at the end. Now here we have our workflow, and as you see, the on error is generated. It's generated with the log that I gave and with all information included here. So this is very useful if you use it from the workflow designer. You don't have to worry about the merge tool and any additional things. So let's now test it and see what happened. As you see here, we have additional information about the scenario, about the name of the scenario, the step name, and additional information about the error, okay? the filler. So we can customize it and add more additional information here. So let's now move to propagation of errors, how to propagate it from a sub scenario to my upper scenario here. So let's assume that here I don't add my, I don't have any problems with my workflow here. No, I don't use this. I will keep it as it's in the beginning. But what I will do is to add another workflow, sub workflow that treats my putting in a file, for example, or opening a file or doing any additional treatment. And I will raise an error inside this sub scenario. And you will see that it's not propagated to the upper scenario if we don't handle it ourselves. So here I will do some. Here is my sub scenario, and what I will do is to try to open a file. I will try to open a JSON file, and by default, it goes to the logs, my log folder inside the project. And here, the simple.json doesn't exist, okay? I will just put it here as, keep it as default, but I don't have any JSON file called simple.json in my project. So this will erase an error in this step. And we will see how to use, to propagate it to the upper scenario one, we call it. Here, I will just create data, just in case to put data inside. If we open the file, we will put the content of the JSON in this field, in this data context. So I generate, okay, it's empty, it's not empty, and now, yeah, okay. Here we are. Here now we have funds processing and my sub scenario. Let's use this sub scenario. I will use it in my processing here. What I will do is in activities, I go and use this scenario. This scenario, I will check and take the sub scenario. And the important thing, in order to handle whenever this scenario ends, because it could be asynchronous, we have to wait the end of scenario, and then we end this step. Let's look what is generated as code. Here we are. As you see, I start my sub scenario. For the input data, I don't need any data to give to my scenario. I want it just to start. But if you see, there is just an end step. Whenever this scenario ends, we end this step and we end our fund scenario then. But what if this scenario ends on error? What if this scenario ends on timeout? We will not have any information inside this, for this scenario at least. for the upper scenario. So what we can do here is to handle the information of our sub scenario, but how to get them? The important one that to get here is the scenario itself, sub scenario. I call it sub scenario is SSC, okay, like this. Here, my upper scenario, it's scenario, SC, and my sub scenario is SCC. But what can we do here inside? We have what we call code. Each scenario has a code and a label. And this code takes the values from error. And if you see here, we have some status of our scenario. The one that are interesting for us, it's the OK, cow, and timeout here, at least in our scope. For the others, they are used mainly by the factory to follow the status of your job. Here, let's look, for example, how to leverage this information. We already got it from our scenario. So this scenario, when it runs, it has already a code. Either it finished well or with cow or timeout. So the interesting ones that we use now are here. So if we do if on the condition of our script, if we do it's equal to e dot error dot cow or our sc dot code is equal to e timeout, I will do something. You can have many configurations here. As you see, it's very open. You can, it's free coding, so you can do whatever you want. But the interesting ones that I will give you are somehow very trivial. Let me copy them from, I already prepared them. It's 3 lines of code. I copy them here. Here, what actually I do is to put my upper scenario in status cows. So it will finish with error if I want, of course. Depending on the business scenario that you want, you may let that the upper scenario should end in error or should add in a warning or something like that. It's up to you. But the very important one is the label of the upper scenario. The label of upper scenario could have additional information about this scenario itself and adding the propagation of the error from the inner scenario. And all this, after doing this, what you have to do is just to call the callback of the scenario, the upper one that is here. So this function will add end here and then log the information that you want. So there is one last thing I want to show you is how to use external functions, maybe libraries that you prepare to handle all these errors, the same way for all the projects, for all the scenarios. I will give you a very short example of writing information inside CSV, let's say. Here I will put it, I will copy one function and I put it in the first script that I created, which is here functions. I created just a var temp just to, in the beginning, to create my script, but here a very useful function that logs errors inside a CSV. Mainly what I need as parameters are the scenario and step, the ones that I got from my error callback. And inside, as you see here, I just prepare an entry to my CSV, and CSV has already a header with timestamp, computer name, project name, all the information of my project here, the scenario name, the step name, the code, and the label of the scenario, how my scenario ended, and which error I have. I just construct it with a comma separator, as you see here, and then add it to my file. This is very simple, and you see here we are out of the scenario, so the scenario ends already in error, and we can leverage also additional exceptions inside these functions with regular try-catch in JavaScript. But now, how to use this function inside my process, my workflows? Here, instead of writing the message as I did it in the beginning, as you see here, I constructed all this from scratch. But this is not reusable. So you have to do it each time you want for each error and scenario and so on. But here, what if I call just my function here, the one that I created, this one, and I use it inside here. I call this function, I give it the scenario and the step. I have already access to them here, and that's it. And you have just to customize here that you are not in info, you are in error, and this will be done. So let's just try to build my project again and see what will change.
In the meanwhile, while we are waiting, Samir,
Yes.
there was a question, what does the error code KO stands for? Maybe this can be covered now.
Yes, this is set whenever there is an exception, as I told you. Exception happens, for example, here we saw that if a file is missing, so we try to open it. So there is technical error happens. So this stands that tells us that my scenario ended in an error, and this will raise the error callback. And inside the factory, if you see in your factory, you have jobs, whenever they are processed, they have a status. Either they are successful or failed. Usually, when it's failed, it's in chaos, so there is a technical error happened, it will show as a failed job, okay? In scenario. So it's related to the status of the job, how it runs, if it's successful or if it's failed.
Thank you.
Okay.
All other questions will be covered at the end of the session.
Yeah, well, I think we'll start in 1 or 2 minutes. We will start the Q&A session. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So just the last one I wanted to show. Yeah, here you see that my log activity is just a call to my function, and all this code will be executed. And like this, you can reuse code. You can prepare all these error handlings to your project. And as you see, you will have additional information about the machines, the users, all your infrastructure. You can centralize them into a database. And just to mention, Svea, maybe it's now it's time to mention the blog post that I will release soon.
Yeah, perfect. I have already informed the attendees via the chat that the blog post will be published after the call. So this is great that you wanted to mention this as well.
Yeah, why I mention it, because this function is already there. And also I have 2 other functions. I think they are also interesting. One is for logging the activities or these errors into the business activity monitoring. And there also there is a reference to a blog written by Martin, my colleague, about the business activity monitoring. Another function is how to log this information to a database. I use a very small and how to say Express SQL server, but you can do it for any other type of database. So you can have a look to this blog post and you will find all this information inside. And I think I finished with this. if there is any question, you are welcome.
Perfect. Thank you very much. And I hope everyone could stay on the line. We have Priya. She would like to ask a question. I have unmuted you, Priya. Yeah, go ahead. We can hear you. Priya, we hear your background noise. You can ask your question now. It seems not to work. So we have a question in the chat. We did not cover timeout scenario. What can we do there?
It's a good question. So let me show here in timeout callback. It's really the same. You will find it also inside the blog. You have to do it here, for example, not error. Sorry, the timeout here, and then log any additional information that you want. The only difference between the error management and the timeout, it's about the kind of error. If you see here, the error has an exception. It's technical. For example, the one that I raised here, it's about file. I cannot open a file that doesn't exist. So this is really related to technical issue. But here it's just a time. It's the time that a step waits. For example, a step has a timer. It starts whenever the step starts. If the time exceeds this default time, so a timeout is raised. So this callback is raised and the scenario is on error timeout. So we don't wait, for example, for a page indefinitely. If we click to start an application, a page is loading. We do this default timer for 30 seconds. It's here in milliseconds. If after 30 seconds, the timeout, the page doesn't show up, so we end our scenario in timeout error. So for the handling, from the handling perspective, it's the same. We handle the errors the same way. But just the cause of this error, the stopping of the scenario, is related to a time out, not to a technical exception. This is the difference between them. And also, what maybe I can say a word about that, it's the disable. We can disable the timeout for a certain period and then resume with redefining another timeout. If you want, we can dig this if there is time or no other questions. I hope that this answers the question.
Yes, I hope so too. Thank you. And I would try again with Priya. So Priya, I have unmuted you. Can you speak up?
Yeah, sorry, the name is incorrect. That's why I call you.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's fine.
That's my
problem. I'm confused. Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
so
Samir, this is Channa. So
Channa,
Samir,
I'm sorry.
yeah,
Channa.
So you expand the timeout. Once it reaches 30,000 seconds, it will end into the end scenario. See, after reaching 3,000 seconds, if I want to trigger another scenario in our workflow, so how to write that piece of code in this scenario timeout?
You want here, if I understand, here in this, whenever the timeout raises, you want to start another workflow, okay? Another scenario.
Exactly. Yes.
Here, for example, as I showed you here, there is, instead of just ending this scenario, you can start another scenario here. For example, start scenario, and you give the name of the scenario, okay?
Okay, and we can loop back it to the any of the activity in the workflow, correct? If I'm not wrong.
It's, you can do it, but I think it's not the advised practice Because here, what you can do is to try to avoid the errors in your scenario. Whenever your scenario is on error, you cannot come back to a previous state. What you can do is to prevent errors. For example, I give you an example here. Instead of inside my sub scenario here, I do, for example, I trying to open a file here. The best practice here is to add a try catch, because here we see that it's potentially the file, opening a file, if it doesn't exist, raises an error, and this we can handle it. We can decide afterwards. For example, I can say it's not that important for this file, so I don't want my scenario to fail in error. In this case, if you add a try catch here, you catch the error here, and this scenario error will not be erased because I already treat it inside my code.
Yeah, that's answer my question. Yeah, if you use try catch method, you can, you just want to skip that error and you can proceed with the workflow. That's the
yeah,
start,
it
right?
proceeds. Yeah, you do, for example, here, for example, I can just show it. Like you do the if try catch here, and inside the catch, if you catch the error, you do just end step return. You will go to the next step and you continue your workflow. Depending on the criticality of your file, you can decide if your scenario continues or not. Yeah.
Yeah, that's answer my question. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Perfect, thank you. So you can see, everyone, it's really easy to ask a question live. You can also ask a question via the Q&A section. When you hover over the black menu of Zoom, there is Q&A. You can write your questions there, or you can just raise your hand when you hover over your name, and then I can unmute you so you can speak up. And while we are waiting for the next question, I wanted to emphasize you having a look into the SAP community, because there are only a few days left that we have SAP Intelligent RPA as topic of the month. And there are a lot of blog posts, also a nice blog post series where you can find a lot of information about Intelligent RPA. And of course, as Samir mentioned, we will publish his blog post after the call. And once the recording is available, we will also include this, or Samir will also include this into the blog post. So I think there are no more questions. Then I can only thank you, Samir, for having been part of the SAP Community Call series. It was a pleasure having you.
It was my pleasure too. Thank you, Svea. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. And yeah, have a nice day and stay tuned for the next community calls. Bye-bye.